We've got Tony Scapone with the Epic Gamble.
Next on Eternal Dirtles.
Extreme thank you to all the Dirtomaniacs that support the show. If you want to get ad-free content and extra free content, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldirtles and support us. Proceeds go to editing the show, upgrading equipment, and helping us travel to events. What it do? Hello and welcome to Eternal Dirtles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me this week, special guest Tony Scapone. Tony, how are you, man?
I'm good, Zach. How you doing?
I'm doing good. So we have you on this week. We want to talk about the Epic Gamble, which is a deck that we haven't really discussed on the pod yet. So it's going to be interesting to kind of explore this deck with you and kind of understand the inner workings of how the Epic Gamble works.
Sure. Yeah. No problem doing that. I've been playing it for years. So
yeah. So I know what. So let's. I feel like it's probably better if I have you go over the basic workings of the deck, and then I can just ask you questions as they arrive. So tell me about the Epic Gamble. What makes that different than the Epic Storm? What makes it different from Black Saga Storm, which is sort of a deck that you've come to be sort of the guy to play. So what's different about the Epic Gamble than those two decks? Eternal Dirtles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
Well, it's funny because the Epic Storm has actually moved into playing Gamble now, so we're getting closer. But, powerful cards be powerful, right? The Epic Gamble is essentially a Belcher deck. You can group it in with decks like Oops All Spells, Necrodominance. It's got that raw power and speed. It's not like if you get turn one by it, they got lucky. That's what the deck does.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it as often simply because it doesn't have to, right? There are plenty of hands that the deck has that can go longer, and if you're playing against blue, you don't necessarily want to just be going all in. But it's essentially an LED Echo Storm deck. It abuses that combination probably more than any other deck. We're talking regularly, like almost every single game, you're wheeling with Echo of Aeons multiple times, 2, 3, 4, 5, but think Lion's Eye Diamond, Echo, Gamble. We have Soul Lands, Saga, Petals, Chrome Moxen, full set. Burning Wish. We even have Reforge the Soul, Jeska's Will. So we never used to play Reforge and Jeska's in kind of these bigger storm spells, just because they're a little more all in. Mm-hmm. But since Vexing Bauble was printed, because we always had defense grids, right? We had 4 defense grids, and we'd play Relay to kind of, because it's hard to interact with, but it is slower and it's getting worse and worse these days. Even
this is Galvanic Relay, you're saying?
Correct. Yeah. Galvanic Relay, yeah. The Epic Storm has come off of that recently and gone to Gamble. Yeah. We did that a number of months ago, and since we have effectively 8 grids to work with, I play 7, and Vexing obviously is a little bit different than grid, but we have a lot more protection. We can be more forward and all in. I don't know. Do you know what Jeska's Will does?
I do know what Jeska's. I play Commander, so I do know.
There you
Jeska's
go.
Will
So
does.
You know it well.
So Jeska's Will. If you control your Commander, which is I assume flavor text for you.
Yes.
You can either exile the top 3 cards of your deck and then play them until the end of next turn.
No, it's only
just this turn.
Yep.
Okay, so just this turn, or you can count the number of cards in the opponent's hand and make red mana equal to the number of cards in the opponent's hand.
Correct. So if you wheel with Echo and you have a defense grid in play, your opponent has 7 cards and they cannot get rid of any cards. Similar with Vexing Bauble as well. I mean, they can counter something and let it get countered to reduce your Jesk as well, and sometimes they will. It's not the greatest against Frog sometimes because they can just dump their whole hand, but enough of the time they'd be losing if they decided to do that anyways. Yeah. You do target, so the One Ring kind of stuffs it a bit. But it's really powerful. We never really, or not never, we came off of it for quite some time because it's can be high variance. You can, you have to go all in a lot more, but just not the case now with Vexing Bauble. It's a house, and of course we got Bergie, my love, my babe. We used to play 4, but now we just play a couple. So there's some slight differences of how it used to be, but it's pretty much the same deck. Just either present constructs pretty quickly, slamming grids and vexing baubles, and as soon as we get the green light, we're going to be off and running.
Yeah, you're one of the larger construct decks right now, with 8 cast being completely out of the realm of playable. If you look at, I play Cephalid Breakfast. Occasionally we have a 4/4, but for the most part, it's like 3/3s are the top end for that deck. You can get up to like 7/7s occasionally.
Oh yeah. I mean, to truly leverage Saga, you want something to go alongside it, right? Usually it's disruption. With 8 cast, it's counters, and obviously some other beaters for more pressure. Disruption in the form of Chalice, that sort of thing. Black Saga Storm, you had mentioned, similar, except it has discard, and then the threat of a fast combo. Whereas the Epic Gamble is just a more consistent and threatening combo. So
yeah,
you have to mulligan a lot for specific cards to be able to deal with me, and then maybe I just play a Saga into Saga, with a Chrome Mox and beat you up, and you're sitting there on a mulligan to 4 with double Force of Will, Well,
so one of the interesting things about this deck is the advent of Gamble. Is that in this deck, Gamble is just a tutor. You want the Echo of Aeons in your graveyard. You probably already have an LED in play when you're casting it, and with Vexing Bauble, you basically have that protection. So this is just a free 1 mana tutor.
Quite often. Often enough. If you have Lion's Eye Diamond, then most of the time you're going for Echo, and you don't really care, what you're discarding. A lot of the times there's lines where you go Hellbent on purpose so that you can gamble. You play out all your mana. Chrome Mox can actually help you get Hellbent, and then even if you don't have a Lion's Eye Diamond,
you just want to have
it'll go to the graveyard. Yeah, if you're Hellbent and you have enough mana to cast it, then you're good to go. And then, of course, if you have Echo of Aeons, but you don't have Lion's Eye Diamond, it is a gamble, but depending on how many cards you have in your hand, it's more or less not much of a gamble. And then there are circumstances in which the card can be very complicated, right? There's a percentage of the time that, you're gambling, and there's all sorts of crazy lines. A lot of the times it's like you have lethal, but then you can give yourself a certain percentage chance for it to be protected or to get double lethal, so that, because you're always trying to, okay, I can kill them, but what if they have this or this? So we might as well try and play around it if it's free. And a lot of times Gamble just gives you free options, or gives you an out when just no other card would actually give you an out. I'll give you a quick example. I just played yesterday. I think it was in the challenge. I top-aided the challenge, but I went all in on turn 1. It was like Saga, Chrome Mox imprint, couple LEDs, went for Echo. It was against Breakfast, and they stuffed me with a Force of Will. I was left with only a Saga and a red source from my Chrome Mox. And turn 2, I drew a Chrome Mox, so blank, right? Turn 3, I draw a Gamble. I get LED off a Saga. I cast Gamble, I Echo, I proceed to kill them on the spot.
Nice.
So awesome. It feels pretty good to turn 3 someone after you go all in and only have 2 permanents on turn 1 and draw a blank on turn 2.
Yeah. Oh, man. Here's another question I have about Gamble. You probably have an intense sideboard plan, right? Because Gamble also having tutors allows you to have those silver bullets in your sideboard.
Yes and no. So, I mean, yes, it is. It's 15, literally 15 singletons.
I'm looking at it, yeah.
I mean, you have Urza's Saga, which have tuturables. You have Burning Wish, which is responsible for creating quite the robust wish board. And then, yes, you also have Gamble. So you have 3 things that are tutoring. So I try not to. You don't want to, when you're building really any deck with a wish board, you don't want to just automatically make a giant wish board.
Yeah.
But there are ways to do it where you kind of Venn diagram the effects that the cards have so that you have a decent mix of, card names, card types, mana cost, what they actually do. You can mix and match. To give a quick example of what I mean. So Void Snare, it's a sorcery, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just stay in the sideboard. When I'm bringing in things for prison or whatever it is, it comes in. It's just incidental that it's a sorcery and can be gotten and in game one by Burning Wish. It also has some other utility. If you have a Burgie in play and you have an active Opal or a Chrome Mox that you'd be able to re-imprint, Burning Wish actually becomes a ritual and can refix your mana.
Okay.
Because with Burgie in play, Burning Wish only costs 1, and then Void Snare is free. You target your Opal, you pick it up and replay it, and you get 2 mana because of the Burgie and the Opal itself. So now you've actually gone up a mana. So it can it has all sorts of use cases. Because I get that question a lot. Why aren't you playing Chain of Vapor? Is it worth having Void Snare in your sideboard? And it's like, well, it's not actually a sideboard card. It just sometimes I can get it game one, and it's nice to have that, but it's coming in.
Yeah, and you're generally going off on your turn, so a Void Snare, cast on your turn as a sorcery effect isn't really that big of a deal versus having a Chain of Vapor to like sneak in something or something like that.
Right. Plus, we have grids in play a lot of the time, so
yeah,
and things that we don't want our grid to get bounced or horn or whatever.
I looking at this deck, I think that I've been really putting in. I think I have in the last month, and this is chump change to a guy like you who is playing Magic Online a little bit more often than me. But since October began, and we're in this is November 3rd, I put in 67 matches to Magic Online, which is more. Wow. That's 600+% matches that I had this year than last year for EU, Eternal Weekend. So I'm putting up a lot more just to practice and understand what I'm seeing. I felt like last year I didn't immediately recognize what my opponents were on. But one of the things that I think that I have been playing against the Epic Gamble this whole time, and I thought it was Ruby Storm, and I think that's a thing a lot of players will look at and be like, oh, I'm playing against Ruby Storm. What are the two differences between those decks?
Huge differences. So
yeah.
Ruby Storm plays Ruby Medallion. They don't play any 0-drop. Some versions will play Petal. They certainly don't play Lion's Eye Diamond. They don't play Echo of Aeons. They're not regularly popping off on turn 1. They have 12 mountains in their deck.
Yeah.
They have somewhere between 14 and 17 lands, usually 15 or 16. They're not the Belcher deck that we are. They use Past in Flames. They have other cost reducers too, right? They have Rawl. So they are packing a very high density of pretty much all instants and sorceries so that they can leverage the Rawl triggers, the Past in Flames flashback, Rawl ultimate, bonus round. These are very important things that if you're playing Chrome Moxen, Lion's Eye Diamond, Vexing Bauble, Defense Grid, Petals, none of those cards actually synergize with that. You can play some mix of them. It's all powerful stuff. You can. This deck ultimately was created from Ruby Storm. Me iterating on Ruby Storm and probably a long, at least 6 or 7 month Discord argument as to whether you should be playing LED or not.
Yeah.
I was always in the camp of, I don't know. The thing, it taps for 3, right? Maybe we should, a free spell that gives you 3 mana, maybe it should be in the deck. But over time, we just kind of realized we were talking about 2 different decks. But there was a point that before I got to a list like you see in front of you today, there were hybrids, right?
Yeah.
Originally, the deck was called the Epic Ruby Storm. It was just Ruby Storm kind of mixed with some of the stuff that at the time what the Epic Storm was doing. And actually, what really turned it into a gamble, and at that time, Faithless Lootings, but just moving into the Echo thing, was Diamond Lion, believe it or not.
Diamond Lion, okay.
Yeah. So, me, I'm always making...
All-Star.
I'm always making wild decks, and I was like, let's do an 8 diamond, epic whatever.
I have
It'll
foils,
be
so
it'll
like
be fun.
once that pops off, let me know so I can sell.
Hmm. And it performed better than what I was playing. So I was like, okay, well, let's not play Diamond Lion, but let's lean into this style a lot more, and that really is what further separate it from Ruby Storm.
Yeah, I mean,
Ruby Storm, you tend to be safe on turn 1. Every now and then they'll turn 1 you, but they're a little more slow
that's
going.
kind of a hoop to jump through for that deck. It feels like,
right? Especially now that at least I've dropped Petal, and a lot of people have as well. But the strength of Ruby Storm, or one of the big strengths, is they can just ignore so much hate. They don't care about Null Rod. They don't care about Collector Roof. They don't care about Chalice. They don't play 1s and 0s. They play 3 Rite of Flame, and 1 in the sideboard. Like that's it. Basically, the only thing they're worried about is like Deafening Silence or something like that. They have a couple Blast Zone out of the sideboard, but they just get to ignore so much hate.
Yeah, I was going to say the decks, obviously don't look similar to you because you play them somewhat often, but to the layman, I see red, I see rituals, and I'm just like, yeah, there you go, it's the same deck.
Yeah,
but
Red Storm, it's Ruby Storm, yeah.
Yeah, the hate is so much different. The way that you have to attack these decks is so vastly different. What would you say is the way to attack the Epic Gamble?
Pass. We'll go to the next question. You need to stop the initial onslaught. You need to have some sort of interaction that prevents you from dying immediately, because we will do that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the strength and part of my answer to people when they ask me, how do I beat Chalice on 0? How do I beat Vexing Bauble? How do I beat Null Rod? How do I, kill them before it's in play, right? Like, don't let them take a turn. That's kind of plan A. We have various other plans to deal with stuff like that, but stop the initial onslaught and play a permanent that is difficult for us to, have our main game plan.
Yeah.
And then have a plan to actually close out the game, because eventually we're going to either make Saga tokens or find an answer. The Epic Gamble is although it's super fast, it's also very resilient. You can't just have a bunch of counter spells if you have no threat. We're just going to keep drawing gamble. Like, it doesn't take a ton of resources for us to all of a sudden win the game on the spot. Yeah. There's 3 Reforge the Soul, for instance. I don't know if you know that one. It's the Wheel of Fortune that costs 5, like actual Wheel of Fortune. Discard your hand and draw 7, but it has a miracle cost of 2. So you can be on totally low resources and then, oops, I guess we'll draw 7.
Back into it, yeah. It's interesting that with this deck, like with most of these decks, it seems like you need some sort of permanent. Like, if you want to have a solid game against them, you need some sort of permanent based hate, like Deafening Silence, something like that, and then you need something to stop them from just going off. Before you can get that down. Force of Wills, Force of Negations, that sort of stuff. You need some way to stop the deck from doing its thing initially, and then you need something to like hold the zone until you can get a chance to attack in. With these tempo decks, obviously, Daze, Wasteland, all that stuff is helpful. But I definitely feel like you need something when your shields are down, just so that you can make progress on the board.
Yeah, cards like Frog, Tameo, Entomb, Reanimate is pretty good.
Yeah.
But we have a lot to combat it, right? If you tap out to play a Frog or tap out to make an Atraxa when there's a Vexing Bauble in play or a Grid in play, I don't care how many cards you draw, you're dead.
Yeah, there's nothing scarier than a Vexing Bauble hitting the play. And the only thing scarier than a Vexing Bauble hitting play is a second one hitting play and then having them draw a card off the first one.
Well, in this case, Vexing Baubles, or one of its primary purposes, is to protect and play out your grid. Because as you can see, we have a lot of 0s, so Vexing Bauble is a pain in the ass for us.
Yeah.
Right. But it will prevent, say it comes off of a saga, now they can't use their Force of Will, we can land our grid, or it'll eat a consign to memory, and then we can play the grid. Ultimately, we want to get grid into play, and then crack our bauble so that we can play out our stuff and keep going. But it's certainly good at allowing us to do that. And sometimes it is just, I mean, if we have enough mana, you can totally win with Vexing Bauble in play, especially if you get Bergie in play, or all it really takes is 3, and then Jessica's Will can put you up to 7. There's, at first glance, someone might look at this and say, why would you be playing Vexing Bauble with all these zeros? Like, this looks, like it's not going to work out so well. And it's just not how it plays out.
Yeah. So, pivoting from the Epic Gamble, I want to ask you, Tony, how long have you been playing Storm variants for?
So I mean, I've played the game technically for like 30 years at this point, but I didn't really play Storm until, let's see, I took a hiatus from like 2010 to 2017.
Okay. And
pretty quickly I knew I wanted to play Storm. Like, I really enjoyed watching the content. It was super flashy. And so as I was playing other decks, I was consuming Storm content as I kind of built my collection. Just bought into Burn because it'd be a cheap way to just, get some wins and scope the format again. And then I played Delver for maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So probably like 2019.
Okay.
Probably around there, 4 or 5 years.
And then just picked up with the gamble.
Well, it started with Ruby Storm because, again, I knew that was kind of a cheaper option. And then it was clear to me that it could be improved. But there weren't any serious people working on it. Like, there were a lot of people who enjoyed the deck and loved to mess around with it and talk about it in Discord. But, you didn't really get any spikes that were jamming the deck constantly. And I wanted to, as I do with really any brew that I do, I just want to make it as good as it can be within whatever you're trying to do. And sometimes that winds up offshooting into something else, and you just start working on two separate things. But at that time, I wanted to play either the Epic Storm or Ad Nauseam Tendrils. I watched Bryant. I watched some Modern too. Caleb, I think Scherer is his last name, playing some Blue-Red Storm in Modern back in the day.
That was my jam back. That's actually one of the very first times I met Phil in a tournament. We were both on Blue-Red Storm in a Modern Grand Prix in Richmond.
It was that deck.
Nightmare. Like, you play at large events, you play Storm. I don't do that normally, so this was the first time ever playing like a deck where you have to do like actual math. And I remember I went 6-3 on the first day, so I was
pretty
like,
good.
Yeah, it was
really
good, but not good enough to day 2, but still like I wasn't upset with myself. I thought I did okay, but then I went to sleep that night and I was just playing Storm in my sleep, and I was like, never again. Absolutely no, I would have not gotten any sleep for a day 2 had I made it. Like I woke up and felt like I hadn't slept at all.
Yeah, that deck is it's a lot of fun. Actually, fun fact, at one point, or maybe it wasn't too fun at that point, but my collection got stolen through Moto. It got like hacked I don't know. But not like all of it. And I still had the cards to play Blue-Red Modern Storm, and I just ported it into Legacy. While I got everything back, but it took them like a couple weeks. So there were a couple weeks where I was just playing Gift Storm in Legacy, and I have still today. I keep iterating on it. Like, I've probably at this point made like 5 YouTube videos on Legacy Gift Storm. It's really not bad. You get to play Force of Will. Like,
you get to play Gifts Ungiven. That's my favorite Magic card.
It's a lot. I'm like out of breath when I finish a league with that deck. You do not get any free wins at all. Like, you have to fight for every part of it. But it's a ton of fun. I could never constantly play it.
That is exactly how I felt playing Blue-Red in Modern. Was like, you don't get any free wins, and then like at the same time, other people were just playing Splinter Twin, and I was like, I I have the mana base. Like,
Mm.
I'll spend $80 on Splinter Twins and just like not play a harder deck, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's funny you had mentioned before about the Ruby Storm being like kind of a meme deck, because that's how I, like, you know, up until, I don't know, less than a year ago, that's how I viewed the deck. Like, you know, obviously, you know, getting Ral out there helps the deck out a lot. But, you know, I remember, you know, playing blue, white, red control in Modern, and like people would be like, oh, I'm on Ruby Storm. Like, you can't afford Shocklands? Like, what's going on here? But it's wild that the deck just does so much better. I mean, obviously, it helps to have access to Rite of Flame, but the deck just does so much better in Legacy.
I don't think that's actually necessarily true. I think since they put Ruby Medallion and with the printing of Raw into Modern, I know Ruby like flopped at the Pro Tour, and you know, but it puts results up fairly often. I mean, literally my first Modern challenge was with that deck, and I wound up top fouring, and I've since top eighted a couple times, and I hardly played the format. But I will say it has drastically improved in Legacy, pretty much because of Raw, and you can just lean into all the synergies that we talked about before. Because the problem with Ruby Storm always was, still is, but not as much. Like, the deck has gotten better and is better against these matchups, but tempo, it's not the greatest for them. Reanimator, like faster combo decks. But you can play Vexing Baubles out of the sideboard, and the deck is just a lot more powerful, resilient, and able to like fight through counters and tempo and stuff. So it's in a lot better of a spot.
For somebody looking to get into like the Storm Brotherhood, right? So let's say someone is contemplating right now, a month out, less than a month out from Eternal Weekend, and is like, I want to play one of these decks. Which one do you prescribe, like the like beginner to play, that they're going to have, one, the most fun, and two, the most success?
Is cost a thing as well?
No, let's say they can afford Lion's Eye Diamonds.
Well, I mean, if you want to play Storm, we're eating pretty good right now. And by that, I mean, there's a ton of different variants that are like, although I think there are a couple or a few that are better or the best, all those underneath, that gap has closed a lot more, in my opinion, right? In my opinion, if you're looking to spike, it's the Epic Gamble, the Epic Storm, or Riddler. I think they're the most powerful Storm decks. Yeah, I mean, I know Killaby is a genius, but that deck is busted. If you master that deck, if you devote yourself to that deck, you're going to put up good results. It's difficult to play, you know, you got to be that type of player or whatever, but it's very good. But then underneath that is Black Saga Storm, even traditional Ad Nauseam Tendrils builds. You can play Grixis, you can play it with green. There's like 5 different ways you can play Black Saga Storm too. Seriously, I mean, you can play it without Beseech. You can play it with Ad Nauseam without Beseech. You can play it with both Ad Nauseam and Beseech. You can play it without Ad Nauseam and Beseech. You can play the LED Echo and Tomb version that was absolutely busted for a bit there. There's so many different ways you can play that deck. And then, of course, you have Ruby Storm. I'm probably forgetting a Storm deck at this point. I guess I didn't answer your question directly. It's I would recommend, because I mean, we get this all the time. Yeah. People come into Discord and they ask that very question, and basically what we tell people is, listen, there's a lot of content. Both myself and Bryant put out a ton of content. Yeah. Not that we're not the only Storm content creators, but we're the most consistent.
I would say you're the most prolific for sure. Yeah, you got, between the two of you.
So watch the videos, see what you like, try them out, you know, get on Moto. It's pretty cheap to just get a renter account and see what clicks with you.
Yeah. Well, Tony, before I let you go, one, I have to ask, when's the next episode of Brews of Paradise coming out?
We were just going to record, just a couple days ago, but my daughter got strep. Killaby also got
Oh
the
man.
morning of recording. He was like, "My throat is killing me." I guess his daughter had something, and his I don't know if they're married. I forget. Maybe they're engaged, married, girlfriend. I don't know, but she got
Partner.
it as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. So we had to postpone it.
Yeah. Wolf.
But soon.
Soon.
I have a more than a full page of notes. Killaby's
Awesome.
got a bunch of notes. It's gonna be a good one. So
Yeah, I always like to sit down. Nice long podcast too. I like a long, like, get my work week going with a nice, like,
Mhm.
just I can buckle in. I really
I mean,
appreciate that podcast.
you don't have to listen to it all at once, but any of the feedback that we asked for, people said they wanted long episodes. So
Yeah.
we're like, what the heck? We had Max Thorson on last time, and we were just talking about Magic for hours.
Yeah,
It was 2 hours, but
that's the beautiful thing about this game is, like, every now and again I'll invite somebody on that's never done, like, podcast before. I'm like, can you talk about Magic at your LGS in between rounds? You're gonna be fine.
Right.
Yeah. Well, with that said, where can people find you?
Well, certainly in, I'm sure, the description below
of
of this podcast, I'll have my, it's called a Linktree link, which is just a link that goes to all of my links, but my YouTube, my Twitch, Patreon, of course, the podcast that you mentioned, Brews of Paradise, that's on Spotify. But I do mostly Twitch. You won't find me for the next, like, I don't know when you're going to put this out exactly, but I've got issues with Comcast. They capped my data, switching.
No.
So it's bad. I've had a few streams just crashing. I can't stream right now. So I'm trying to do more YouTube content, but certainly just Google my name, man. Just Tony Scapone. Yeah. It's one word. All my stuff is there.
Yeah. Give the, at the very least, you're on YouTube right now. Go to Tony's YouTube page. Give it a sub. Give the videos a like, all that stuff. And with that said, Tony, man, I appreciate having you on, man. It's been enlightening.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the Legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Thanks so much for watching.